This is Beth. I'm Beth Lapides, and welcome to The Infinite Creator live on Substack, a special unit of communication. Hey, Ray. Hey, Elaine. Welcome to I think it's going to be monthly, and I think I'm going to start there because what we're going to talk about today, and ask me anything about this, or if you're stuck, let me know. Um, my Substack this week was called Your Own Personal Cadence. And that is because your rhythm is one of the most critical parts of your work. What you're doing is one thing, and then how often you're doing it is another thing. In the Substack that I put out today, it was primarily about the rhythm of your voice. The rhythm of your voice is the wave that your inner truth rides in on. That idea, and how I come to understand that and what it means and how you use that in your own work is huge. How you find your own rhythm, and that your own rhythm is the thing that helps you find what you want to say. Okay. So there's a lot about that. And if you read the post and if you have any questions right now, right here, like pop them in, that's awesome. But what I didn't cover in the post, which is just for us, is this idea of rhythm in your work cycle and how often you're going to write. I can't tell you how many clients ask me, hi, Joshua. I can't tell you how many clients ask me, how often should I write? People are trying. I personally am like, write all the time. I write all the time. I'm kind of always writing, no matter what I'm doing. I'm thinking in words. I'm thinking about ideas. You know, it, thinking is writing in a way. And if you're thinking, and if you're in process on pieces, on shows, on memoir, on all the things that you're writing, then you are, in fact, kind of always in process, which is beautiful. But then there's the question of rhythm in terms of output, like rhythm in terms of scheduled writing and rhythm in terms of output. For instance, are you a writer who writes a book once a year? That's a lot of writers are doing books once a year. I write a book a year. That you say, I write a book a year. Okay. Some people write a book every 10 years. Some people do a show. For me, I love creating rhythm uh, through a deadline. For so many years, I had on Cabaret every single Sunday of the year. I mean, we took a couple weeks off at Christmas, and I loved having that weekly rhythm. And in fact, I was very convinced that I could only do it in that weekly rhythm. People would say, well, I'd be like, I don't know, it's so much every week. People say, well, why don't you just not do it every week? It has to be every week. It's very, like, it has to be, it was on a weekly rhythm, almost in the same way that, synagogue or church, is on a weekly rhythm. I felt very much like that about it. At a certain point, I really burnt out, and I knew weekly rhythm wasn't going to be possible. So, and we did a big anniversary show, and I almost thought I'm going to stop doing the show. And then a venue became available, and I thought, I mean, I guess I could do it monthly. I mean, it was like kind of monthly or nothing. I was up against that wall. And then once I started doing it monthly, it was like, I literally don't know why I was so attached to weekly, except that I did love that feeling, and it made me write in a certain way, and I looked at the world through kind of a weekly lens. And so you get to pick for yourself, or you go. So now Uncab is more or less monthly, though I give myself August and December off, and I'm taking a couple months a year to develop It's a Lot, my solo show. So, but there still is a show at El Cid once a month, except for my 2 months off. So, that. in my groups, in my creativity groups, we have one group that's once a month on Wednesdays, and we have one group that's twice a month on Tuesdays. And those people have that kind of rhythm, are set up into that kind of rhythm in order to, be accountable and in order to have a certain kind of check in. Obviously, twice a month, the check in is a little deeper and a little different than once a month. So you get to decide, there are a lot of people, we're on Substack, so let's talk about a Substack rhythm. There are a lot of people here on Substack that are writing every day. You're getting a post from them in your inbox every day, plus notes, plus lives. And it's really like they're just in Substack. That's their thing. I don't have a daily Substack rhythm. I have more or less weekly Substack rhythm, though it does have to work around other deadlines that are either live and in person and on stage, or sometimes something, a job that I have. So but I have more or less a weekly rhythm on Substack, and I'm trying to figure out what my rhythm is with these. I like the lives, and I'm trying to, because you don't always know. I mean, that's one thing to say, is you don't always know what your rhythm is on something. I'm trying to see, am I gonna do lives once a week? Am I gonna try to do lives once a month? Am I gonna, you know, are people really interested? That's one thing. Sometimes you keep up the rhythm in order to get people interested. You have to, I guess it's interesting to talk about the beginning of Uncap with that. We were doing a show, we were booked for three shows, and there was enough people coming after three shows to extend for 3 months. And but I was really, fighting to get people in the room. And then there were enough people coming at 3 months to extend again. And then I heard, oh my gosh, it's Ray Solly. Hey, Ray. Well, I'm talking, oh my God, I'll bring you into this conversation because you were there. I'm talking about rhythm and rhythm of work and the cadence of not just your own voice in your work, which I wrote a lot about today in the Substack, but then the cadence of how often to do what you're doing. And rhythm does create momentum. I mean, when I assessed, I'm gonna take a little side. That's true, Ray Hernandez. Side note, I did a little analysis because so many people were really like asking me about momentum. Like, I need more momentum. And I came up with I love an acronym. I love an acronym. And I I started to think about what it was, and it BAT, which is at bats, which I love, because at bats really, you need more at bats in order to win, right? And or certainly in order to play. And the besides cadence, and I think cadence is really part of all this. B, boundaries, A, actions, and T, team. And you really need a team. I really, really, really need a team. You cannot create momentum alone. And it's so great to see Ray Solly, because he was part of my team. And Ray was part of my team when I was at William Morris, and we sold some shows. We sold some shows together. And so at bats. And so rhythm is part of that. It's part of action. How often are you going to take actions? And there are some things that you need to do daily. There are some things you need to do weekly. There are some things you need to do monthly. There are things you need to do seasonally. There are things you need to do yearly. And there are things you never need to do that you think you might need to do all the time. So that's interesting too. There are things that you're doing monthly that you probably should do weekly, and we could go through all that. I tend to think about time, and more I'm really working on making sure I think about time in a non-linear way, because I think that's kind of a myth, and I think it's, kind of crushing. But if you start to look at time, not just in a loop, but in a spiral where it's an ascension, um, that can really help. And when you think about rhythm, and you think about this kind of movement, that in your work, that is a really beautiful thing, and is very I don't wanna say soothing, but it in and of itself, you can sort of feel the momentum in it. So, I love that. So I work with people a lot on trying to figure out how often should they be putting out a Substack? How often how long is it gonna take to do a book proposal and then write the book? How long is that gonna take? How often should they be on stage? How frequently should frequency is a remember when this is for the people who aren't 20, there was this crazy thing where Dan Rather was attacked. Dan Rather, who is here on Substack and doing amazing work now, we can all think of, Dan Rather as our colleague. Uh, Dan Rather there was this time when Dan Rather was attacked, and the attacker said to him, "What is the frequency, Kenneth?" And it was one of the great mysteries. What does that mean? Where did it come from? And what is the frequency? In a big sort of new age, goo age kind of way. What is the frequency? What is the um, what is the vibration? When you think about your own personal cadence, it is about vibration. I talked in the piece that I wrote today about when we were editing early on Cab Stuff and we first were listening, it was the first sort of time of like assessing what we had recorded, and I'd be in the other room because I'm not that post-production girl, but I would hear someone and I wouldn't be able to hear what they were saying. I was in kind of far away, but I could hear by the sound of their voice that it was them. I could hear it was Bob Odenkirk, or I could hear it was Kathy Griffin, just by the vibration of their voice. And that was really great. It really clued me into that thing about personal personal cadence. And it's the thing I have thought so hard about in comedy. It's the thing that really destroyed me in the comedy clubs was even if I wasn't gonna be in that rhythm, to sit backstage and to listen to that rhythm for, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, to just listen to that comedy club rhythm, I just found it so numbing, and I hate it. I really felt like it was, pushy, and I felt like it was manipulative, and audiences were laughing at stuff that wasn't funny because there is something about the rhythm itself that is kind of funny. But it's manipulative, and I don't like that. I don't enjoy being manipulated or manipulating. So, it's not necessary. There's plenty of ways to get laughs besides that rhythm that you know what I'm talking about. But you need to know how to punch. Like in order to do comedy, you need that thing in your rhythm. You need to know how to punch. And it's an easy way to learn it is to do those rhythms. More likely for wonderful success is finding your own rhythm, having your own punch, knowing how to get it on your own. So that's, a little bit of that, which is the technique. But I learned so many different ways about this, and I remember I was in dance class in college, and our teacher had us get in a circle, and it was in the front of the circle, and or not the front, but at some point in the circle, Julie said, everybody, start walking like Bob, and then everybody will walk like Bob, one at a time, mimicking, it kind of like a game of telephone, and and then when they got to me, to see a whole circle of people walking like you, it was so shocking because you just think you walk, you just think, "Well, I have a walk." And then you see everybody walking like you, "Oh, I do, I kind of see, I do now kick my right leg." And realize like, "Oh, I do kind of walk on my tippy toes." Oh, and you realize like, "Oh, I like without doing it on purpose, you're so yourself." So Dolly Parton has that great quote, which is, "Find out who you are and do it on purpose." Okay, greatest quote. Um, it's the doing it on purpose part, it's the not so there's really 2 parts of that. One is find out who you are. A life's work. And some of that is the work is revealing yourself to yourself. that's how you find out who you are. And the way you do that is not suppressing, not covering, not veiling. And the reason that's hard is because you become vulnerable. If you're really you, uh, and you get rejected and you get, that hurt, that's awful, right? It's more awful and we're not awful because in some ways you're at least you. When you're rejected, I once heard somebody say, never submit your things to somebody who, if they say no, you're going to feel bad about it. Like, I've had people ask me about submitting, the writing short form memoir and where should they submit their stuff. And I really have, I think that's like just a great piece of advice because, you submit to somebody you really admire and they say no or not yet or we liked it, but you're like, all right, you submitted to somebody you're kind of judgy about in the first place, not right for you. You don't like them and they say no. It's just like this awful feeling like, why did you even ask? Who are they to say no? It's just not in alignment. And that's all you have to think about is this thing aligned? And is this thing allowing you to be you? And is this thing allowing you to have your rhythm? And is this thing part of your rhythm? It's all like once you start thinking like that, it all just falls into place. Um, anyway, we did the walk thing and you realize how much you're just you just by walking. And I do love to just sit on a bench and watch people walk by and be reminded of that thing. Watch that parade. But what I was saying about that was, what was I saying about that? Oh, yeah. So you want to be you. You want to be able to be finding out who you are. So, sure, something like that. Having yourself reflected back to you by other people. Sometimes in comments, sometimes a critic, sometimes a life partner, sometimes a boss, sometimes a creativity coach. It's one reason people hire me is because I'm like, oh, that's who you are. I see you. I'm working all the time to see my clients and show them to themselves. And this is your best work, and this is where your work could go. And you seem like you might not actually want to do that thing that you say you want to do. Why are you saying you want to do that? And there's so many ways that we try to hide from ourselves. I like this phrase, step aside and let yourself through. I find that to be very helpful. Step aside and let yourself through. We're always fighting with ourselves, partly to protect ourselves, partly because if we are ourselves, and we get rejected. But on the other side of that, if you are your real self and you're your full self and you're your whole self, I mean, everybody's holding back a little. Um, Protect yourself. But if you are willing to show a lot of yourself, your true colors, as we say, then and it goes well. How great is that? That is the greatest thing because you're getting to do you, the thing you're really here for. So I work with the assumption that you're here for something. I work with the assumption that everybody kind of has an assignment. I work with the assumption that everybody, I did Jake Hogan's podcast the other day, which is called Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan. I don't think it's up yet. But he wanted to talk about the creativity stuff. He's an amazing writer, producer on The Simpsons. And it's a great format. I love that title too for a podcast is because isn't that the thing? Don't be alone when you're listening to podcasts. So he was arguing, and there's a million ideas. There's a million ideas anybody can do, and I kind of think no. I think that we get ideas coming through us, but not every single idea is as uniquely perfect for each person. So I think that's why I do the Pick Your Next Project Zoom. That is where I help people pick projects, which is something that my friend Jessica Bendinger, way back when, asked me if I would have lunch with her and help her figure out which script to write. And she pitched me a few. And then I told her, like, yeah, do that cheerleader one. Do that. Like, I just absolutely, that's the one. And partly because it was who she was and, her experience and her feelings about it and, its originality and a lot of reasons. And she did write it and it became, uh, oh my gosh, people help me. What is the name, of Jessica's movie? Bring It On, Bring It On. Uh, so anyway, so that kind of clued me in that like, oh, this might be something. Yeah, yeah. So all along, I've been helping people do that. I mean, when you're helping people write comedy or stories, you're always helping in that. But I specifically help in Pick Your Next Project. So check that out if you're looking for that. That's free. That's a free Zoom, so you can meet me and I can meet you. Um, and so picking the right project, doing the doing the work of finding out who you are in the 8 habits. The new book I'm working on is the 8 habits of infinitely creative people. One of them is knowing yourself. That's a habit. Getting to know yourself is a habit. So whether it's, I love the habit of conversation, deep conversation with friends, with coaches, with sponsors, with clients, I just try to be in deep conversation. That's, around the house, everywhere. Keep it deep. So, but knowing yourself and you know yourself, partly through the bats, taking a lot of action, having a team, creating boundaries. These all help you know yourself. And will it be a print book or an audiobook, S-Ray? Unclear, but I'm aiming for print. We have a proposal out now that is a print proposal. I know it was for those of you who haven't listened, So You Need to Decide is an audiobook, 8.5 hours of audio. And it was a great project and I got to do it during COVID, which was amazing. And I talked to so many people about decision making and, I loved writing my own story about it, and I loved anyway, I really do love that. But it's very frustrating to not have a print edition. So, because you can't, you don't have a thing to hold. It's like you want to hold the book. You want to hold the book. You want to hold the book. You want to be able to sell copies of the book. And it all is quite complicated in the audiobook world. But it was also really because knowing myself and knowing who I am, I do love innovation, and it was really fun to be able to do uh, an innovative, original audiobooks are still not quite a thing. And so it was really wonderful to take what, is the conversational form of storytelling which is so much of Uncap and so much of what I love, and be able to pour it into this new bucket of things. So, yeah, I don't have a cadence of doing an original audiobook once a year. It was really a big project. And people say, well, you could just do a print version. I could, but it wasn't meant to be that. So it seems a little not quite right. The next book will be a print version, and that's that. We're rounding the end of this. Very lovely. It's lovely to see you. Any questions? You can ask me anything about cadence, about rhythm. The rhythm, listening to yourself, being able to talk out loud. One of the things I say in the piece that I put out today, it's it's so miraculous that, like, you're in here, you're in your head, you're very confused, you're like, "Ah," and you're, like, stuck, and there's too many ideas and blah, 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 and then you get on the phone with someone, I say phone, it, could be a lunch date, and you talk to people, and suddenly what was very confusing and confused is suddenly kinda clear. Suddenly it's like, oh, you're saying the thing. So run the recorder. I always say when you're having that kind of conversation, when I'm working with a director on the show, I'm always running the recorder while we're talking about it. Um, I think it's a beautiful thing about humans that it becomes clear as you're saying it a lot of times. When you have someone to say it to, I think of the audience as a poultice, an audience will bring it out of you. And I think a lot of times about, you know how there were those couple of Truman Capote movies at the same time. In one of them, Infamous, I think, he is telling the story of In Cold Blood to a series. It's like a sequence of scenes, a series of the swans while they're at parties and dancing, and he's working it out. You can hear him figuring it out with them as his sounding board. What a beautiful thing to be a sounding board. Um, and it's just, that was Apple trying to call me back. My microphone's not working on my computer. So the thing is that he really worked it out that way, and he has such a cadence. So listen to people who have, the voices. You can hear Dolly Parton when she's saying that in your head. Um, there's an incredible clip in a very well worth watching documentary, Hail Hail Rock and Roll, which is about Chuck Berry, his 60th birthday party concert. And there's this scene where Keith Richards is sitting in the in the green room, and I ask him about, what makes Chuck Berry so great. And Chuck Berry says, I mean, Keith Richards just goes like, it's more than just the sound of it. And he's thinking like, what is it that's more than just the sound of it? I finally it's the total sound of it. And it's just so great because it's really just the sound of it. It's all those vibrations, all those cadences, all those frequencies, and it's the sound of it. But it sounds not quite enough to just say it's the sound of it. So, it's like, that's just, it's the total sound of it. And just the way he says it's so great. So I encourage you to find ways to talk about that and to figure out what the cadence of your own work is. What do you want to do daily? What do you want to do weekly? What do you want to monthly? That whole loop. And what are you working on? And and also figuring out as your one thing to think about when you're figuring out what your projects are, why me, why now? And also what kind of cadence are you looking for? So if I'm working on something that's going to take a year and I'm going to be doing it over a year, but then I'm going to need a little dopamine hit. I'm going to need to, if I'm writing a book for a year, that I'm also going to need to get on stage and I'm going to need to connect with people. And how often do I need to do that? And then what kind of I'm just really trying to figure out. I love this. Thanks for coming. Am I going to do Substack lives? I was doing a podcast as a beta test. Who's going to be the team on any of that? Writing things. So I'm always trying to figure out what my cadence is. I have a pilot with partner that's a 5-year cadence or whatever. It's a lot. I have to figure out every time, as I'm developing. So I'm always working on the cadence, and I'm always, looking at my calendar, and I'm always trying to figure out how often and how much and what to do. So that's really it. And I encourage you to really dive deep into who you are and when you are, who you are and how often you're going to be who you are in what format, and make it persistent, be persistent in it, because, creativity, as I will remind you as we close, creativity comes from a word that means to grow. Doesn't mean to make, though we do make things, and that is joyful, and we do love to hold the book. The word itself means to grow, and we're so fortunate as creative people to get to have work that also is part of that, growth. So that's the infinite loop. There's you make a project, and you choose a project, you make it. As you create it, you are changing. And so by the time you get back over here to choosing a new project, you are changed. And one of the reasons you pick a project is that It's something that's going to help you in your evolution. It's something that's gonna help you grow and become all that you're meant to be. It's gonna help you in your becomingness. It's gonna help you know yourself. It's gonna help you, develop your crafts, your skills, and your soul. Your soul is excited about it. That's how you pick a project, is that your soul's like, ooh, here's a chance. So that's what's happening. And where you're meant to be in the world. So all that stuff. So you're here, you pick a project, you evolve, you keep looping around into this, it's a version of the spiral, is the infinity loop, like this. Phew. And I just love that. I love that. It's a how fortunate, we are to live in this crazy world. And I don't know a lot of you, but I can't imagine, we're all looking at, in this world, creating this world, and looking at this world, trying to figure out this world, what is happening, and how to assist, how to assist it going in what we consider the right direction: peace, love, harmony, evolution, people being allowed, all the beautiful things. And so how do you make a world where that's more possible as a creative person? What's your role in that? You have to think about it. What's your role in this world? Part of the role in this world is the role of being the creative person that you are, not sitting on that, not wasting. I mean, it's part of being resourceful. Resourcefulness, while we're on that, we'll say the triangle of creative genius is AIR is the acronym, and uh, resourcefulness is the R, imagination is the I, and A is the alchemy, being able to turn something into something else, a little bit of magic. And resourcefulness, everybody is stronger on one. It's interesting to think, what are you strongest on? What are you weakest on? So for storytellers, especially nonfiction storytellers, resourcefulness, super key. You've got to be able to look at your life and use it as a resource. It's essentially a resourceful form of art. Fiction writers, more imaginative, and uh, using the imagination a little more. You need alchemy. I mean, you need to be able to turn something into something. If you're weak in that, then we need to talk, and I need to help you with that. But I know for me, imagination, not the strongest. So I've got my Imagine Rock. So I was at a dear friend's visiting in New York, and he had a giant thing of rocks that his mom had left him, all with words. And he said, "Oh, pick one, take one home for my mom." And I just put my hand down, I peeled it, and this was, and I wanted to trade it in, of course. When you get the thing you need, you often want to trade it in for something you like better. And then right after that, I was invited to be part of a show where it was a Barbara Streisand. It was Barbara Streisand songs benefit for Project Angel Food, and I'm always trying to find, when I'm invited to do that show, these Barbara Streisand songs that are barely Barbara Streisand songs, because not that not that advanced. And she sang Imagine once, so we got to do that. So that was kind of cool. Anyway, using your triangle of creative genius to create the work that you can do. And it's not even like it's on point. It's not even like your work needs to take on the biggest things. Just doing your work creates the world that is a better world. Whether you're running a theater or writing fiction, whether you're doing, sandcastles as an art form. My friend Adam Moss wrote a beautiful book called The Work of Art, and his one chapter is about two artists that do sandcastles, incredibly beautiful. Surround yourself with creativity, be part of the creative force, not, that's the force for creating, you know, growth. And we're at the cusp. There's so many amazing, I'm going to give you a little pep talk now. There's so many amazing things that are happening that don't make the headlines, because the headlines are, they're like, blocking. There's so much to deal with. But there's all sorts of innovation that's happening. There's, Instagram found out, oh, she likes that. So they're always sending me the innovations. And, mm, I mean, there's, cancer cures that are, sound, all with sound. There's mm, kids that have just invented sunscreen that cures melanoma. I don't there's everything is happening. There's so much breakthrough science on environmental level. Windmills that have no blades, is just brand new. Using moss on in bricks to clean the air. It's all possible. Like, we have it all. We have everything we need. And your job is a creative is not to get sucked into the maelstrom. Did I say that right? I don't think so. I've never said that word out loud. I've only seen it. The maelstrom, perhaps that's how you say it, is to do as much as you can to, number one, stay aware, because you can't, you have to stay aware. Number two, take as much direct action as you think you can take, as it seems appropriate for you and where you feel you'll be effective. And number three, do your work. Do your work. And because there is nothing. I think one way I think about it is your work isn't necessarily going to fix anything. Your work isn't going to, so, you're not going to write your novel and that's going to world peace ensues. But what I do feel very strongly about is that not doing your work is a destructive force. If you're given the creative spark and you're not doing it, you are tilting towards, um, more than not helping. You're to not be grateful for gifts you've been given is almost out of alignment. Doesn't mean you have to put yourself, doesn't mean when I say, yeah, this is important. If you have a gift and you're not using it, well, it's ungrateful, and that energy is it's not elevated energy, number one, and it's not grateful energy, and it's not you've been given a gift for a reason, and that reason is to spread imagination, resourcefulness, joy, to make sense of the human experience through your work, to sort through what it means to be a parent, what it means to have heartbreak, what it means, all these things, and whether it's highly comic or whether it's very business oriented, it can land anywhere. But if you have the gift of creativity, you're one of the, do we all have the gift? That's a question people ask me a lot. Isn't everybody has it to some, yeah, I'm going to say everything's a spectrum, right? We're all in a world of spectrum. And that's one of the big things that has shifted, gender fluidity and, the spectrum of sobriety and the spectrum of, the neurodiversity spectrum, and everything is a spectrum. And I love it. It's a spectrum of spectrums. So, in the spectrum of creativity, you might decide, well, I've only been given a small spark. Okay, well, you can flame it. You can fan it or you can let it go out. So that's your choice. And you might be somebody who feels like their creativity is well served with one pottery class a week. Great, then do that. But don't ignore it. Like, meet your creativity, meet it where it is, and um assist it, encourage it. There's one thing that you want to whet that appetite, because that is so healthy. And that is what the world needs. And I'm not talking about making more paintings, making more stuff. I'm talking about really letting yourself grow and being who you are. So you don't walk around frustrated. You don't walk around mad. You don't walk around, taking it out on the world because you've got this spark and it's not being used. So it's like shooting out and burning stuff up. Yeah, like that. You want to be caring for that spark. You're the flame keepers, right? You are the keeper of that flame. All right. Um, I love seeing you here. If you know where to reach me, do you know where to reach me? Well, I'm here on Substack. You can find me here. You can DM me. You can get me at beth@uncabaret.com. You can find me on Instagram, Beth_Lapides. That underscore was a big mistake. Bad decision. And I'm doing a Pick Your Next Project on September 10th. And I have I do have 3 spots in my Tuesday group that have just opened up, and that is a very exciting place. I have 1 spot in my one-on-one, and I think my Wednesday group is full right now. So, but, always happy to talk to you about where you might fit in. Get on my calendar, go to the website, bethlapides.com, get on my calendar or reach me in the DMs. Thank you, Julie. I hope you're well. So great to see you here. And I will see you next time. Let me know if any of this helped. If you have any questions, it's been lovely spending a little bit of time this week with you, and I will see you again next time. Be well and stay creative.